If there is one last move for the New York Mets to make before opening day, it could be a trade with the Padres. After they just signed Nick Pivetta, a couple of possibilities might have opened up. I'm going to break them all down on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. Well, the final two major dominoes of free agency fell on Wednesday night. Alex Bregman has signed a 3-year, $120 million deal with the Boston Red Sox. The contract, of course, includes opt-outs. That deal really not of much consequence to the New York Mets. We knew they weren't going to sign Bregman, and he likely wasn't going to go to the team that really factored into the Mets season much anyway. So now he is a Red Sox, but the bigger news that could relate to the Mets is the fact that the Padres signed a starting pitcher. Nick Pivetta lands on a 4-year, $55 million deal. Now, Pivetta was the top free agent starting pitcher left on the board going into the offseason. He belonged in a similar tier as Luis Severino, Sean Manaea, Walker Buehler. It's probably a little bit lower on that tier, and the fact that he had a qualifying offer attached to him really hampered his market. So he held out for a long time before getting a deal, and the contract he signs with the Padres is fascinating because everything the Padres are doing right now is really interesting. They have, I guess, not technically a new ownership group. It's just Peter Seidler passed before last season, and now it is his brothers who are running the team. One of the brothers just got approved as the lead governor of the team, the one that will make all the decisions. There was obviously some stuff earlier in the off season where Peter Seidler's wife was contesting that she should have control of the team. It's sort of a mess when it comes to ownership right now. And that has hamstrung them when it comes to spending money in free agency. I believe this is the biggest deal they've given out, certainly in total value, but even for the upcoming season, it's either Pivetta or Edwin Diaz, and I don't think he quite cracked the $4 million that Pivetta will make this year. It's a $3 million signing bonus and $1 million in salary. Now, overall, again, it is a $55 million contract, but they are essentially kicking the can down the road on the salary so that they can keep their spending as low as possible for the upcoming season. So again, this year, $3 million signing bonus, $1 million salary. Then in 2026, he gets $19 million. 2027, he gets $14 million. 2028 would be $18 million. Bottom line, Nick Pivetta has signed to essentially pitch for the Padres for the next 2 years at $23 million total, and then he has opt-outs. When it comes to what that contract would be, if let's just say the Padres shot them at the deadline, he would be basically free for this year, and then he'd have 3 years and $51 million owed to him, which is, I guess, probably about proper market value for a pitcher of his caliber, $17 million per season. So he would be a movable deal if they fell off a cliff. But what this does for the Padres is it gives them a pretty interesting starting rotation. They got Dylan Cease, they have Michael King, they have Yu Darvish, now Nick Pivetta. That's a good rotation to open the season with. When it comes to the availability of Dylan Cease, you might think, all right, Nick Pivetta's on this team now. That gives them another starting pitcher. They'll have 3 quality starters that they can rely on if they move Cease. Maybe this makes Dylan Cease a little more available. If Cease was available before this signing, why would he not be after this signing? If you believe what the sources told The Athletic in their article about this, though, team sources and league sources, it seems like right now the Padres are planning to keep Dylan Cease. Here's what they say in the article. Team and league sources indicated Wednesday night that the Padres are currently inclined to hang on to Cease, a pending free agent, and enter the upcoming season with a rotation led by Cease, Michael King, Yu Darvish, and Pivetta. While that does not preclude the possibility of another team overwhelming the Padres with the trade offer for Cease, a deal involving closer Robert Suarez remains at least a decent possibility. Looking at Cease in particular here, I think the Padres have set themselves up to pursue the first half of the season in earnest, and then if they struggle, they can fire sale at the deadline. They have Cease, who I think at this point probably has as much value now as he would have at the deadline when teams are desperate to get that ace in there. Now, if a team were to overwhelm them, sure, but I don't know if that deal is out there. So essentially, they are trying to form a leverage position. Meet our incredibly lofty demands for Dylan Cease, or we're not trading him. Now, for the Mets, that would probably be giving up Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat. That's off the table. You can't do that. You can't go up your top two prospects for a rental. Now, at the deadline, if they're out of it, well, then they can move Dylan Cease and still get at least 90 cents on the dollar for what they would get right now, and they might get the whole dollar. So it makes sense to pursue this for now because they've gotten their payroll to a comfortable place. Their payroll right now is $207 million, their actual payroll. Now, their luxury tax payroll is $259 million. They're $18 million over the luxury tax, but that does not hit until the end of the season. So, yes, they are paying some penalties, or they will pay some penalties if they end the year with that payroll. But if they're going to go on a deep playoff run, the money they could make on that playoff run could wipe away any of the money they have to spend on the penalties. At the deadline, if they're out of it, you trade Cease, you trade Michael King, you trade Pivetta, you trade anything else that has value, and you probably get yourself under the luxury tax anyway while shedding a bunch of salary and making the ownership group happy. And then who knows what the future of the Padres is. They still have a team that's locked in with Bogarts and Machado and Tatis and Darvish and Musgrove, but they're in a very interesting spot. I actually do believe in some respects that they are going to hang on to Dylan Cease because I think they've already shopped him. They weren't liking what they were getting back, and now they're going to rely on this rotation to hopefully carry them to being a contender again this year. And I think they're pretty comfortable, I'd imagine, rolling with this new left field platoon of Jason Hayward and Connor Joe, and maybe they can sign somebody like a JD Martinez to be their DH, and they have Luis Ariz to stick at first base, or maybe they sign Anthony Rizzo or Justin Turner or somebody like that, and they can move Ariz to DH instead of first base. But I think they're going to just continue to shop for guys who are going to look at the Padres and say, you know what, if I'm only going to make $4 million this season, which is what Pivetta has signed up for, I want to do it for a team where I can contend and I can be on a big stage and have some really big moments and be part of a really great experience because the money's just not there because free agency has dried up. I think they're going to leverage that position of being the most attractive destination for free agents that can't find a home. Lance Lynn, maybe he goes there. Like, who knows? Who knows who would take that discount to go play for the Padres right now? But I imagine they are going to just roll into the season with Cease. Sounds like they could trade their closer, though, Robert Suarez. And I want to talk about that possibility in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. You might notice this bag starting to get smaller and smaller because I continue to snack on my Wonderful Pistachios, and this is my favorite flavor right now, the honey roasted. It's one of their no shells variety, which are just so convenient. It's the perfect grab-and-go snack, so you can take them on the golf course with you, which I like to do, throw in my golf bag. It's better than beef jerky, which I used to eat on the course. You can take it on a road trip, wherever you want your Wonderful Pistachios. They're there for you, and it's one of the highest protein nuts where each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller, longer. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, there are still the in-shell options, which are a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Our next goal to get to 13,000 subscribers. I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, so let's talk about Robert Suarez. This is from The Athletic, that same story about Nick Pivetta. They said Robert Suarez is owed $10 million in 2025 and can opt out after the season. The Padres, still seeking to trim some payroll, believe they could field an effective bullpen even if they end up moving him. Now, they have, of course, Yuki Matsui, who was, one of their relievers they got who came over from Japan last year. He has plenty of closing experience. He could be their closer. They also have Jason Adam, who they acquired at the deadline last year. He can fill into a high leverage role. They have some options. And this is the guy in their bullpen who is making the most money. So if they're looking to trim some payroll, let's say they want to get away from being a luxury tax team anyway, you're right now $18 million over. You clear $10 million, or when it comes to their luxury tax, his average annual value on his total contract was $9.2 million. So you basically cut your luxury tax penalty in half. You make this trade. And when it comes to what it would really cost to acquire him, I would look towards the Ryan Pressly trade that just happened. Ryan Pressly was on the Astros making $14 million, I believe. The Cubs picked up $8.5 million of that salary. All the Astros got in return was a minor league reliever. Now, Ryan Pressly, a little bit further along in his career than Suarez. They're both in their 30s, but Pressly a little bit more in his late 30s compared to Suarez in his mid 30s. Pressly had a 3.49 ERA last year with a 1.34 whip, his highest whip in an Astros uniform over a full season. Suarez had a 2.77 ERA and a 1.05 whip in 65 innings pitched. Suarez is the better arm, so it might cost a little bit more to get him, but I don't think you're going to trade an arm and a leg to pick him up because it's still a $10 million salary. And it's an opt-out after this year. Plus, if he decides to opt in, he has 2 years left at $8 million apiece for his age 35 and age 36 seasons. So another team is going to look at that contract and say, all right, if he's great this year, $10 million, he opts out. If he's bad, he opts in, and we're on the hook for 2 more years at $8 million apiece, which is an amount that teams, for the most part, don't spend on relievers. There's a lot of teams who are sort of capping their spending for relief pitchers at $4 or $5 million. Now, there's some big market teams that are willing to spend for the top tier guys, but how many of those teams need a Robert Suarez? The Yankees are good. They got Devin Williams. I don't know if the Red Sox are going to be spending any more after picking up $40 million in Bregman for this year. The Dodgers can't fit him anywhere, not to mention there's no world where the Padres would make that trade. So the more you start to check off teams, I just don't know how many are going to be in on Robert Suarez. And this is an opportunity for the Mets to maybe trade, whether it's similar to the deal for Pressly, a minor league reliever. I look at Trey McLaughlin as one of the options they have. They don't have a ton of minor league relievers that would really intrigue the Padres, but maybe it's a lottery ticket prospect. Who really knows? But you're not going to touch any of your top prospects to get this done. It might be a major leaguer for major leaguer trade. I mean, you might be able to get this done for Sean Reed-Foley and Huascar Brazaban because it just gives them a couple options to slot in their bullpen and they get off of $10 million. I don't know if they would take that. It would really show a lack of market for Suarez. But again, this is not going to cost you much more than picking up $10 million in salary. And yes, for the New York Mets, that technically counts as $20 million in salary because they are taxed at 110% rate on every dollar they spend right now. But this guy can make the Mets bullpen a lot better. Again, last year, 2.77 ERA, 1.05 whip. He saved 36 games out of 42 opportunities. You look at what made him so special back in 2022. He struck out nearly 32% of the batters that he faced. Last 2 years, that strikeout rate has dropped to around 22%, but the walks have dropped as well. He was walking batters at an 11% clip a couple years ago. That was down to 6.2% last year. And this is a guy that really only needs his fastball. I mean, that's it. He has one of the hardest fastballs in Major League Baseball right now. He throws it at 99.1 miles per hour on average. A sinker at 98.8 miles per hour. There was I think a long stretch last year. I remember Javi Reyes of Locked On Padres talking about it, where he just threw nothing but fastballs, outing after outing after outing, just four-seam fastballs. That's it. You look at the pitch mix last year, 71.4% of the pitches he threw were four-seam fastballs. 15.6% of the pitches he threw were sinkers. So put it all together, 87% of the pitches he threw were fastballs. And then he's got this, change of pace changeup that he can throw at you that had a whiff rate of, I think it was 50% last year, where it's just you're gearing up nonstop for 99. And then all of a sudden he drops one at 91 on you and you just have no idea what to do with yourself. Robert Suarez would make the Mets a lot better in that bullpen. All of a sudden, you got Edwin Diaz as your closer. Robert Suarez is as good of an eighth inning guy as you can find because he can slot right back into that closer role if you ever need him to. You have AJ Minter to also help set those guys up. You still have Ryan Stanek. You have Reed Garrett. You have Daniel Nunez. You have Jose Abudo, amongst all the other arms the Mets have in their bullpen mix. I mean, they would legitimately have the best setup men that I think Edwin Diaz has ever had in a Mets uniform. Go back to 2022. What was it? Adam Ottavino and Seth Lugo, Trevor May. 23, he was out. Last year, I mean, who knew who was going to set him up, honestly, at times. I mean, Daniel Nunez became the best guy, but that was middle of the season, a rookie. You had Reed Garrett for stretches. You obviously had Adam Ottavino still at the beginning of the year. That didn't work. You had Jose Abudo for stretches. They did not have any clear setup men to give you that bridge to Edwin Diaz that you wanted. If you add Robert Suarez into the mix with AJ Minter, that is as accomplished of a trio as the Mets have had in their bullpen in a long time. So if it doesn't cost much of anything, that hurts when it comes to prospect capital and simply taking on the contract, to me, I'd be all in on it. Now, I don't know if the Mets feel they need to make this trade. This is certainly a luxury trade. It's a luxury to add on a salary like this. But if it can make you that much better, I would pull the trigger. I think this is way more attainable than Dylan Cease. Dylan Cease obviously would be the bigger impact move. But again, if you have to give up Jet Williams to get Dylan Cease, and Dylan Cease is a rental who's represented by Scott Boras and is going to hit the market, I just don't see giving up one of your top prospects for Cease. I'd be comfortable with Acuna plus. Like, I'd be okay with that because to me, Acuna's ceiling is a little more limited than Jet Williams' ceiling. Jet Williams could be the center fielder of the future. So right now, to me, I think Dylan Cease is still a exciting possibility, but it's more of a pipe dream. Robert Suarez is attainable. They're all but saying they're going to move him. They want to clear money, take on the salary, give Edwin Diaz a legit eighth inning guy that can fill in and be the closer whenever you need him to. And all of a sudden, the Mets are a team that gets pretty scary at the end of games. And I think that would be really exciting to have Edwin Diaz. We know what he can dial it up. Robert Suarez throws even harder. AJ Minter, just as stable of a left-handed reliever as you're going to find. Ryan Stanek throws really hard as well. You're going to have a lot of hitters uncomfortable at the end of the games, and that is exactly what you need. Anyway, what we're going to do to close out the show is we're going to change gears and talk about some notes from spring training. The Mets did make a signing today. I'll tell you who they signed. I'll break down who they won't sign. There's a few notes to go through. We'll get to them in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. If you're an everyday listener of the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service. We'll get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find the link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. Well, the Mets made a signing today. Drew Smith is coming back, a one-year deal worth $1 million with a $2 million club option for 2026. Now, this is essentially a contract where you are giving Drew Smith $1 million to rehab in your facility, and he is returning the favor by accepting a club option for $2 million. So for the Mets, if everything breaks right, Drew Smith returns to them in 2026, a fully healthy reliever on a discounted rate of $2 million. It is a good move when it comes to for one, potentially building on depth for 2026, but also just, doing a favor to a guy that's been good to your organization. Drew Smith, surprisingly, the longest tenured pitcher for the New York Mets. He came in the Lucas Duda trade in 2017. And beyond that, I'd say maybe the next longest tenured guy would maybe be David Peterson would be my guess. But again, it just shows you the turnover the Mets have had, particularly with their pitching side of things. Because obviously you have Brandon Nimmo, it's been around for a little bit. Pete Alonso, Jeff McNeil, those guys have been around for a little bit. I'm looking here. Yeah, David Peterson was drafted in 2017. So technically right around the same time that Drew Smith came into the organization. But it's a nice move for the Mets to bring on Drew Smith. David Stearns basically said he probably won't pitch this year, but best case scenario, maybe you get him back in September. And who knows what the Mets bullpen looks like when that arrives. He was basically signed and immediately moved to the 60-day IL, as was Christian Scott, put on the 60-day IL today to make room for Pete Alonso on the 40-man roster. Christian Scott, according to David Stearns, will not pitch in competition this year. Not surprising. He had Tommy John surgery pretty late. They are going to give him an entire year to just rehab, get himself right. In 2026, he'll be one of the arms that would be clearly in the mix to break camp as part of the opening day rotation. Another guy to talk about when it comes to recovering from injury, Adbert Alzolay. The Mets signed to that 2-year minor league deal. David Stearns said today that he also will likely not pitch in 2025. You would wonder, would the Mets put a similar contract on the table for Brooks Raley? I think it's possible. But if you're Brooks Raley, you're probably better suited just not taking a salary this season and then having a tryout for teams next offseason and potentially getting a bigger deal due to your track record a year from now. But who knows? Maybe the Mets can entice him with $1 million this year and a $5 million club option with a buyout or something like that. Something a little more exciting for a guy that probably has a couple more contracts left in him in his late 30s, who did get the Tommy John surgery as well. Last sort of major note of the day, in David Stearns' press conference, a lot of talk about Pete Alonso, nothing really illuminating, but it eventually got to a question on Jose Iglesias, and David Stearns all but shut the door on a return for Candelita. He said the Mets want to keep their roster flexible, which is what I've been talking about on this show all off season. Keep a spot open for their young players, guys that'll be vying for that utility role. So you're looking at Luis Angel Acuna, you're looking at Brett Beatty, looking at Ronnie Mauricio, and of course the guy they brought in who actually will take Iglesias' number 11, Nick Madrigal. They have said that Madrigal will get some run at shortstop throughout spring here, just to add to his flexibility if he does make the roster, to give them that backup shortstop that they would not have if they basically don't roster Acuna. So that's one option. I think we've already discussed it, but Ronnie Mauricio will not get into games until the middle of March, I believe they said. We learned that from Carlos Mendoza yesterday or on Tuesday as you're listening to this. So that was something of note. Brett Beatty is going to get a lot of run at second base in spring training because they want to make sure that he really is a viable option there. If he does make the team, he'll be the backup second baseman and the backup third baseman. Who knows? Maybe they'll throw Beatty at shortstop for a couple innings, or maybe it's Jeff McNeil. It would be interesting to see if they don't roster Acuna or Madrigal and they pick Beatty for that final bench spot. What would they say about the backup shortstop position? Ultimately, I guess you don't need one. Francisco Lindor is going to play pretty much every inning. You always could put Jeff McNeil there if something happened in the middle of a game, and then you bring Acuna right up. And you could even theoretically put Mark Vientos over at shortstop. He was a former shortstop, but we're talking about high school and rookie ball. Has not played the position since then, and it would look very Wilmer Flores-esque. But that's where the Mets are at here. They are all but done. David Stearns said as much today, although, of course, he said that they always will explore every possibility that's out there. And so maybe the potential to get a Robert Suarez will interest the Mets, and they'll go in on that. Maybe there's a reliever in free agency that is out there for a long time that they can get at a rate that they like. Kyle Finnegan remains unsigned for long enough. Maybe you look at that former closer and say, hey, why not? He's only going to cost us $2 million or whatever it is. Right now, the Mets are looking at their team. They're comfortable with where they're at after the Pete Alonso signing. That really did solidify the middle of their order. So now they're good there. Feels like they're going to hang on to Starling Marte, certainly going to hang on to Jeff McNeil. Carlos Mendoza really spoke McNeil up yesterday. They're just talking about how McNeil is going to play a huge role in this team. He's probably going to be your starting second baseman unless they decide to shift him into the outfield, but they have a crowded outfield right now. So you're pretty much looking at what the roster is going to be with what's in camp right now, particularly on the position player front, where there is basically one spot available where you're going to see who can earn it between all those guys we've been talking about on the show, all the young players. The other thing to note is their rotation is going to be a 6-man rotation, as we talked about yesterday, and they have guys they like. David Stearns said as much today as well. They really like where they're at right now. So I don't expect a bunch of transactions at this point. We're sort of, looking ahead to what 2025 will be. We're going to preview a lot of things. I think the signing of Nick Pivetta was worthwhile to talk about because Suarez is a piece that fits the Mets. I just don't know if they are interested in pursuing that much salary for an 8th inning guy, and also how concerned they would be about those options or him opting into 2 years and $16 million beyond this season. That might be something that the Mets look at and say, not worth it to us. We'll see. For now, though, that's going to be all for this edition of Locked On Mets. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Tomorrow's show, we're going to look at the position player group in particular, which guys have the most improving camp. We'll talk about that unless some other news item comes about that is more pressing. Otherwise, though, I will be back. I'll see you all tomorrow. Make sure you follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show, Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen, first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything, the world of sports. Talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.